At the end of last year, I had a fan reach out to me on Twitter, and he offered me an Amiga 600 that was sitting in his storage for over 20 years, with no idea if the system actually worked. But I decided to clean up the system, get it working, and pimp it out with some modern enhancements. So we're going to take the Amiga 600 that was kindly donated, we're going to take it all apart, clean all the pieces, restore it, put it all back together, and hopefully we have a fully working Amiga 600 that we can play some really awesome games on. This Amiga 600 has been sitting in storage and hasn't been powered on for over 20 years, so it's really unclear if it even works. Amiga 600s can have capacitor leakage issues, and other points of failure include the disk drive. I have no idea about the condition internally, but the first thing I did was start cleaning it. We're going to tear down the system, and we're going to get a look at the internals anyway, so the first thing I decided to do was just spray the case with some Windex and start cleaning it with a cloth. Now you can already see, even just with a bit of Windex, it's starting to clean up rather nicely. The plastic is still quite white. Initially when we saw it, we thought, well, maybe it needs a retro brighting or something, but in my experience, just cleaning older computers really will lift up the gunk and grime that's on there. Now, unfortunately, the Windex is only going to take us so far. As you can see, it's very difficult to clean these keys individually. So what we need to do now is basically take out these keys. We're going to have to open up this machine and separate all the plastics and get them all cleaned up so we can basically make this look really, really nice. Now to open the case, we flip the machine upside down. Then I remembered the trapdoor expansion. As it turns out, it contains a baseboard 601 memory expansion. These were very common for Amiga 600s. A stock A600 would come with 1 megabyte of memory on board, but the baseboard would provide an additional 1 megabyte, bringing the machine to a total of 2 megabytes. Most games at the time didn't need this much memory, but it would help with things like disk caching, RAM disks, and it meant that you could multitask easier without running out of memory. The Amiga was a multitasking operating system, but it did not have any virtual memory built into the OS, so once you ran out of RAM, you would need to close down applications and start freeing them up. So opening the case is quite easy. With a Phillips head screwdriver, there are 3 screws at the base and 1 in the middle on the right hand side. You will notice the warranty sticker has been broken in the middle, which means that this machine was previously opened up at some point. Once the screws are off, the top and bottom of the case are held together with clips. Be very careful that you don't break the clips, as there are no screws on top of the case to keep the system secured. And now, with the case removed, let's take a look at the internals. Now when you lift up the Amiga case, be very, very careful, because there is a keyboard connector that's attached to this keyboard here. And if you don't unplug this, if you just lift this keyboard up fast, you are going to break these connections. And it's one of the most common things that happens when you first open up an Amiga 600 and you're not really expecting it. So let's go ahead and pull the keyboard out. With the keyboard removed, I start cleaning the case. There is lots of gunk and grime in the grooves, so I take a toothbrush and clean it out as best I can. But I'm going to rinse all the plastics in a sink to really give them a nice deep clean. Now comes the part that I dread the most, the keyboard. Not only are the keys themselves dirty and need to be cleaned individually, underneath the keys gets particularly grimy and collects dust, gunk and dirt over many, many years. And there's really no other option. If you want to do this right, you will need to pull out each of the keys individually one by one. Now I know someone is going to call me out for pulling keycaps without a keycap puller tool, but I've done this many times before, so I gently use a flathead screwdriver and my finger to balance the transfer of force. Now I did leave some of the larger keys on the keyboard, as they are trickier to remove and reinsert. So I started scrubbing the keyboard with Windex and a toothbrush and some cloth, removing all the gunk that I can, and as you can see, after some time, it cleaned up rather nice. Now we need to get to the bottom plastic piece of the A600, which means removing the motherboard. The Amiga 600 comes with metal RF shielding, which is something that needs to be removed first. This shielding is quite pointless in 2021, and it's not something that I'm going to reinsert back once we rebuild the system. The shielding is held with small metal tabs that can be lifted with a screwdriver. Once we've dealt with all the metal tabs, the shielding can be simply lifted out of the case. Before I pull the motherboard out, I take a quick look at the motherboard itself. And at a glance, it looks pretty clean, a lot cleaner than I expected. Taking a closer look at the capacitors, none of them appear to be leaking. This is a good sign, and it does give me a lot of hope that this Amiga 600 is still in fully working order. Now the next thing that I do is take all the plastic pieces, including the keys, and clean them up in a sink with soap and warm water. And for me, this is the best way to clean your old retro computers. Once you have the plastics exposed, make sure you give them a nice deep clean. Let them dry for a couple of hours, and now we can start the process of reinstalling everything back together, and hopefully we have a fully working Amiga 600. Now before we put the Amiga 600 back in its case, one thing that I want to do is take a look at some existing hardware internally and replace it with modern enhancements. The first upgrade is to replace the old 40 megabyte mechanical hard disk with a 4 gigabyte compact flash card. These are modern and work great on any Amiga with an IDE bus. I've got a pre-installed image with Workbench, the Amiga's operating system, WHD load, and as many games as I want to play. I reinstalled the floppy drive. Now I have no idea if this works, but it's not something that I'm particularly interested in anyway, since all our games will be running from compact flash. But I will make sure it's reconnected back and mounted in its place. Now for the next upgrade, I install an ACA 620 processor expansion. This simply connects directly on top of the 68000 processor. The ACA 620 upgrades the processor to a 68020 class clocked at 16.67 MHz with an additional 10 MB of fast RAM. This will give the A600 a nice little performance boost all round, which will be great for WHD load games. And now the fun task of putting all the keys back onto the keyboard. This can take you a while, and make sure that you didn't lose any of the springs because they can be easily lost in the shuffle. But you can see how well everything has cleaned up and looks. Taking the time to clean up all the keys really does make the difference. I then reinstall the LED PCB back in its place and reconnect it back into the motherboard. Now the final part is putting the case back together and the screws back in place. I did notice some spots on the side of the case that I missed cleaning, so I gave them a quick scrub. So in the end, how did we do? Well, this is the before shot, and this is how it looks now. There is no color correction or effects that I applied to the screen. This is the difference, and it came out great. And this is one of the reasons why everything doesn't need to be retro bright. When we first got the machine, it looked like it was yellowed and it needed a retro brighting to whiten it up. But you would be surprised how many layers of white can be restored by simply cleaning plastics with soap and warm water. Okay, so we have everything put back together. The Amiga 600 is looking to be in great shape. It really cleaned up quite nicely, and honestly, I'm quite surprised as to how well it actually cleaned up. But now the moment of truth. Let's plug in a Commodore power supply, turn the power on, see if it works, and see if we can play some games. So does the Amiga 600 work? Fortunately, I have a Commodore power supply, and by plugging it in and connecting it up to my display, by turning the power on, shows the drive activity, and after a few seconds, yes, we are in the famous Workbench screen and everything looks good. The mouse and joystick ports work fine. The only issue is the floppy drive. It let off a high-pitched squeal and it doesn't read discs, so I disconnected it. Not really a huge deal since we'll be using WHD load anyway. After a few hours of use, the Amiga 600 ran great without any hitches. And of course, WHD loads are the main reason for owning an Amiga 600. So I'm very pleased to see that a machine that hasn't been booted in over 20 years works without any issues. Now, if you are looking to get your own Amiga 600, I think it is a very good machine to pick up. There is a lot of easy ways to expand the system and get a lot more out of it. But I will say that with most things Amiga these days, it's quite expensive to buy on eBay. So my recommendation would be to take a look at local Facebook groups such as Craigslist or Gumtree, depending where you are in the world, as well as Amiga related forums such as the EAB forum, as well as the Amiga Facebook forum. You may be able to get a better deal on Amiga related hardware there. But guys, we are going to leave it here for this video. I had a lot of fun doing this restoration video for you guys. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you liked it, leave me a thumbs up, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.